In addition to international and domestic legislation, we may need to follow standards, best practice models, codes of practice, and codes of ethics. These may be mandatory or voluntary. In this video, we will look at standards and best practices. In Australia, organizations must comply with mandatory standards under the Competition and Consumer Act 2010. Standards under the Act include various safety and information standards for specific goods and services. Other mandatory standards include accounting standards required by the Corporations Act 2001. The purpose of a mandatory standard is to make safety or information features on products compulsory for the legal supply of the product into the Australian market. It is an offence to supply goods that do not comply with mandatory standards. Whereas many organizations adhere to voluntary standards to inspire consumer confidence in the quality of goods and services provided, for example, International Customer Service Standard. This standard has been written using a consultative process involving leading global corporations, small and medium-sized enterprises, government bodies, institutions, and individuals. This standard establishes a framework for customer experience management that is designed to withstand the rigors of international competition and scrutiny. The International Customer Service Standard applies equally to all organizations, including for-profit businesses, government, and not-for-profit organizations. A voluntary standard often exists where experts have already identified ways to address the safety problem. In these instances, the federal government may make all or part of the voluntary standard mandatory. For example, the Australian Retailers Association sponsors the Scanning Code of Practice. This code protects consumers when buying items that are scanned for pricing details. Voluntary standards are published documents setting out specifications and procedures designed to ensure goods, services, and systems are safe, reliable, and consistently perform as intended. A best practice is a method or technique that has been generally accepted as superior to other known alternatives because it often produces results that are superior to those achieved by other means, or because it has become a standard way of doing things, or even a standard way of complying with legal or ethical requirements. Best practices are used to maintain quality as an alternative to mandatory legislated standards and can be based on self-assessment or benchmarking. Some consulting firms specialize in best practices and offer ready-made templates to standardize business process documentation. Sometimes a best practice is not applicable or is inappropriate for a particular organization's needs. An everyday example of this type of best practice is to look both ways before crossing the street. It isn't a law to look at, and people may find some success if they don't do it, but this often repeated piece of advice produces the best results in the long run if followed. A key strategic talent required when applying best practices to organizations is the ability to balance the unique qualities of an organization with the practices that it has in common with others.